What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. Sorry for missing the last two patch rundowns. 12.16 dropped when I was on vacation visiting family, and 12.17 dropped right before I flew to Chicago for the LCS Championship. And though I initially planned on maybe doing one when I came back, I got COVID. So, been a bit out of commission, or well, under the weather. Really, I've only been out of commission for like one day or so. But we are here on the day of the patch to record the patch rundown. I'm seeking your feedback, by the way. So I know the previous couple of rundowns, 12 point, like 15, 14, 13, around those. I was doing them about 24 hours after notes dropped, which gave us decent data from solo queue to actually measure how big the changes were and get a bit more predictive, or really a bit more prescriptive around like, okay, here's what is working on the patches, maybe try to play those out. This one, of course, we're 3 hours into the patch, or the notes, I should say. Still sick a little bit, sorry about that. I'm going to be, making some guesses here. So let me know which one you prefer, either now, right now, under the YouTube comments, or after watching. But let me know, because I'm happy to do either version, so just kind of curious what you would prefer. Okay, so 12.18 is here. It's actually pretty small, pretty straightforward, so this should be a relatively short run, all things considered. Let's talk about it. Okay, so Ashe. Ashe is getting a buff to her attack speed scaling on Q, even rank 1, but much bigger at rank 5. Ready for a very minor flashbang. Here is the data. So here is Ashe's attacks per second with no items, no runes, just assuming maxing Q second, which is clearly the most popular and most successful build for Ashe as an AD carry. Obviously not as big of a deal for something like Ashe support, but pretty much directly buffs Ashe AD carry, buffs her landing phase a decent amount, right? 4% more damage while trading with Q, 8% more damage if you somehow didn't buy any attack speed, which, you're missing some attack speed, you're whatever your zeal item second is going to have attack speed. So, okay, you're going to have probably Zerk as well. So in the real world, it's never going to be quite this high, but certainly a decent damage increase overall. It's a pretty solid steroid as well. Keep in mind that Ashe Q not only gives attack speed, but also a bunch of bonus damage. Even it's like 5% more damage while in Q, that's 5% more damage on an already heightened state, and that's actually pretty powerful. So pretty solid sized buff right now. Ashe appears to be relatively balanced as far as solo queue is concerned for the majority of players. So Ashe will be just vaguely strong and should be in a pretty good spot. Speaking of champions who are in a good spot is Hecarim. This champion definitely came out the gates way too strong. I believe might have gotten micropatch nerfed. Either way, definitely deserving of being nerfed here. So 25 base health down. Okay, sure, that's pretty minor. There's a lot of these sort of delicate touches in this patch. That's fine. AD ratio is down a little bit. I'm going to quickly look up Hecarim builds from 12.17 and see how remotely close AD builds are to tank builds, and it seems, not close, really. There's like 5 or 6 offensive items that have a higher first item win rate than Turbo Chem Tank. So unless you think there are extreme behavioral biases, there's probably some delicate behavioral biases in every single case. Pretty confident that AD builds are not about to be trumped by tank builds, though that is obviously always a concern. Hecarim definitely is a champion who, I think, when correctly designed, should be building AD the whole time, meaning that he should be burstable, right? Like, he's meant to be a drain tank where, like, item 1 is like a Trinity Force, and item 2 could be like a Black Cleaver or a Death Stance, which, like, notably doesn't have armor or doesn't have health or MR on it. Right, and so that to me is the core conceit of being a drain tank fighter. Mundo is different. Mundo's a full-on juggernaut. But, like, to me, the core conceit of being a kind of drain tanking fighter is that if all goes well, you can be the star. Like, if all goes well for Vayne in a team fight, she pentakills you, right? Because she's invisible, dances around, does percent L3 damage, and, like, eventually just always wins. Having carry roles that function not as marksmen, but like as melee champions or as mages or whatever, need to have something that's special to them that, like, they can do that, like, wow, that's so bullshit, such as Vayne turning invisible and dealing 50% of your health as true damage every 3 seconds, right? Like, yep, that's required for a champion to stand out and be special. So Hecarim, like, I think, has a bunch of AD, can do a bunch of damage, can do a bunch of healing. Those things are still true, but the cool thing about fighter items, to get back to the point, is that fighter items almost never cover all bases, right? They're either really low on health budget, like Black Cleaver is 3,000 gold for 300 health, which is 800 gold of health and everything else is damage, or it's Ma, which does literally nothing when Talon fights you. Ma doesn't even trigger when Talon fights you. You bought 5 longswords. That's the item, right? So I think that's a really cool way to design fighter items. I think largely that's been happening. I think it's really good. And anyway, Hecarim needing to buy fighter items to succeed, aka high AD ratios, I think important for the success of the champion. This goes back to, hey, there's an AD ratio nerf, and it's why I looked up his builds, because, hey, there's room to nerf AD builds without his best builds being tank. If Hecarim's best builds are tank, you destroy all counterplay of the champion. So, okay, fine. Either way, again, there are still AD ratio nerfs. His overall snowballing is certainly too high. Looking at solo queue data, his win rate curve actually doesn't go up and to the right. I know this is not mirrored, so I'm going up to the left, deal with it. It's actually relatively flat, maybe a little bit of growth. I know I'm not like showing you the growth, the graph here. You could nerf scaling a little bit and it would be okay. He wouldn't be like falling off a cliff like old Hecarim was. So there is room here. I actually do believe that there is room here. And so I think this is actually a pretty reasonable nerf, again, to lower his snowballing, lower his frustration when ahead. He doesn't kill you quite as fast or quite as hard. And then W also is less healing coming through. The base value went down and the AD ratio went down. Okay, so what does this mean? Let's go back into it. Okay, so Hecarim, this is his health and his W healing. Okay, so his health is down by 25, which is, again, not very much. Now, again, if your build is, for example, something like, I don't know, Eclipse into Death Dance? Muramana? Like, theoretically, you could have the full version of these nerfs. In realistic worlds, you're getting a, Divine Sunder or Trinity Force. The second item most frequently for him is actually Manamune. The second most common is Death Dance, so okay, he is on, and then item 3 is also that. So most people are just buying one health item until item 4, and which is like sometimes Force of Nature or Dead Man's Play. Whatever, either way, base health nerfs are going to be felt. Okay, let's move forward. The next piece is just how much sort of self-vamp he gets from W. Worth noting, the AD ratio on W doesn't do a whole lot. Even if he ends with 4 full AD items, he goes from 30% vamp to 36% vamp, or 35% vamp in the old version. Now it's 25, becomes 29. These are not massive numbers. I kind of don't love fake AD scaling that doesn't really do anything, right? Like, this does technically matter. The numbers do get higher, but it just kind of feels there. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Technically, you do get gains here. I do feel weird about things that scale that don't really scale. That's all. I don't know. It's a piece of a thought. It's not really important. I'm not going to dwell on this too long. It doesn't really matter ultimately. And honestly, probably does feel like intellectually satisfying. Like, I'm raising my vamp. I'm double dipping because I do more damage and this happens. Anyway, so again, health is down. Omni-Vamp is down very slightly during W. Again, it's always still halved for allies. Okay, great. Here's the big one, though. I think the most important one, realistically. I would argue this is the more important one. Pretty substantial down on Omni-Vamp, but let's move forward regardless. Here is how much damage, say, tap of Q deals with the AD ratio nerf from 0.95 to 0.9. Not very big. Is a clear speed nerf, of course, all that fun stuff. But the bigger change is the fact that the increased damage per stack has actually gone down a bit as well. Now, I actually did something stupid, I'm pretty sure. I think I, for some reason, thought this stacked 3 times. It stacks twice. Wait, hold on. No, it does stack 3 times, right? I'm going to read the tooltip off of Lawlytics. Yeah, 3 stacks. Okay, I was right. Sorry. Old Hecarim was 2 stacks. There are 3 stacks. So here is... if I understand it correctly, as you get stacks, right, each stack is, at 100 bonus AD, it was 10% bonus damage. So at 100 bonus AD, this was 30% bonus damage. Now it would be 27% bonus damage, right? Not a huge difference, but the numbers are there. It is lower. So here you go. Here is the Q damage after the ramping nerf, which means in a longer, much more successful fight, he is going to be less overbearing on you, though, of course, still a very large amount of damage for an ability you can cast while moving with a 1-second cooldown. Definitely pretty powerful stuff. Ultimately, this is going to nerf Hecarim's snowballing potential. This is going to nerf his late game. This is going to nerf how much he takes over a game once he's initially ahead. Yep, he's nerfed. Definitely a pretty strong champion. Worth noting that people are building him somewhat wrong. Trinity Force is still a solid 2% win rate above Divine Sunder. That's the people do tend to buy Triforce while seemingly have slightly higher gold income than Divine Sunderer. Those still, I don't think, enough to make a 2% win rate delta a big deal. The really big winner, actually, for first item win rate is, as far as I can tell, Chempunk Chainsword. That item is actually doing incredibly. Some people probably have been picking it up already, but the build path is great. And it turns out it's a really good stat stick for attack damage, ability haste, and everything else. And though, even though you're not buying a Sheen item, that's fine. You don't apparently need one. So anyway, Chempunk Chainsword, the real tech, by the way. Also worth noting that it seems Phase Rush is the real build, by the way, as well. Most people are going Conqueror. It seems as though being more Assassin-y is the better option. So think about that a little bit. Alrighty. Next up is Kalista, a very simple nerf for pro, 30 base health. Not much to talk about here. This was the nerf I just kind of had always assumed was going to be coming for Kalista. This felt like the easy, obvious answer. Kalista is a pro play problem. She's been permabanned for like the entire summer split and playoffs, basically. Teams aren't willing to let her up in the draft. And so saying, okay, well, maybe you can all in her back, right? Maybe Draven can fight the Kalista. I don't know what Draven Kalista looks like. I don't know what Cog Kalista looks like. Cog, by the way, is strangely a very good early game champion because he outranges other AD carries and just gets 30% free attack speed at like level 2. I'm slightly exaggerating the numbers, but not by much. He actually, strangely, has pretty good fighting power. That if a fight goes badly, much like Kalista, where Kalista just always chases you down and just hops and you die, Kog'Maw kind of does similar things because he outranges you and is stacked with the tempo and you kind of just die. Should pros script against Kog'Maw? Probably not, but like, Kog'Maw, for example, just is a good laner. Am I saying Kog is going to pick the Kalista? Not really, although slows do work against her. Anyway, having 30 less health means there's a decent chance that you can find some other good early game champion and fight up well against Kalista, and that's the goal here. We'll see if it happens. We'll see. Kayn getting red Kayn nerfs. I know one of the designers in internal communications was like, hey, could we pair this with a blue Kayn buff? Because blue Kayn isn't doing very well from the data that we can see. Red Kayn is doing too well. Blue Kayn is seemingly too weak. So here's another red Kayn nerf. Unfortunately, no blue Kayn buff yet. Would like to see one at some point. But anyway, the Q damage is going down via a factor of some bonus AD scaling. So pretty much every Kayn is going to go red Kayn, of course. Let's check out win rate over time curves for him. And it is indeed up and to the right. So a scaling nerf does seem well targeted for Kayn not being a scaling monster, which maybe he should be, I don't know, but just even after like he got to the transform, it's still up and to the right. He is a scaling monster for sure. Doesn't have to be a bad thing. I think champions are allowed to have different like win rate curves and whatnot. I think it actually creates interesting texture to the game where, okay, team comp A outscales team comp B because like their team fight is better, or you know, you have like special things that like clearly stand out, like Ornn or Kayle, who like clearly get a certain bespoke thing, distinct thing that comes online late game, like Ornn upgrading items and Kayle transforming and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Cassidy gets his R cooldown. Like, there are champions that are like, oh, I can identify this champion as a late game champ. Maybe you feel strongly that like Kayn has identity as well. But outside of like needs to reach transform, I don't think there's that much the identity. And so, you know, leave room for other late game champions is kind of my feel, right? I don't know. A thought in my head, regardless. Anyway, AD ratio is down. Bonus 80 on the percent health damage here, so we can talk about that and what this means overall. This is an approximation of how much damage new Kayn Q deals. As a result, keep in mind this is always doubled. He hits usually with both halves of Q. There's other stuff you can deal damage with as well, but actually a pretty meaningful damage cut. This is a pretty heavy nerf to the AD ratio. It's down 30%. Now, the base AD ratio is still there, don't get me wrong. There's still some flat damage added. There's still some base damage here as well, right? But this 5% became 3.5%, 30% lower. It matters. And you can see here that, yeah, there's a pretty substantially, chunked, damage loss for him. So definitely going to matter. We'll see what it turns into. Keep in mind that also is passive, right? Heals him for ability damage dealt. So, yeah, pretty big stuff. All right. Next up, we get changes to Lee Sin. Haha, it's a Worlds Patch Lee Sin buff. So I actually like these. I do like trying to buff him in ways that help his solo queue win rate. The idea of getting him to a spot where he can be at like 48% win rate in solo queue and not a pro problem is a good thing. For the average person at home, he falls off a cliff after not forcing 20-minute surrenders, and he just sits there at like a 45% win rate, 46% win rate champion if you don't force a 20-minute surrender. So can he have better late game fighting power? Possibly. The problem with his E having a good rank up was it became a top laner, had an infinite wave clear, because a resourceless omni-vamping champion with an AoE legend for the entire mini wave was not a very interactive champion to fight against. Shocking. So, you know, they could probably put a minion mod on E and put his E rank up back on. I think that would be a good change for Lee Sin, personally. I'm actually a really big fan of minion and monster mods. I think they're the cleanest way to deal with role problems, in that, like, they're not going to fuck with your jungler. Like, hey, Lee Sin was a problem in top lane, so we nerfed him, and so Lee Sin jungle lost 2% win rate, right? Like, if you're a Lee Sin jungler chilling in gold 3 and you've got like a 50% win rate in Lee Sin, and it's like, well, so Fudge was going to MSI, so my champ got nerfed, right? Like, that feels bad, where it's like, yeah, we nerfed Lee Sin minion damage, and you're like, I could live with that, right? Like, you can live with that. Like, is it the literal most elegant thing ever? No. Here's a little tooltip button that says, hey, by the way, you do less damage to minions. Is there a thematic reason why Lee Sin doesn't hit minions well? No. Is this lore appropriate? No. Is it a kind of blunt designer tool? Yeah. Does it not fuck Lee Sin jungle? It solves that problem. So that's why I really like minion and monster mods, just on everything. Just like, yep, we're using, here's a nail, I've got a hammer, let's go. Every champion, you know. I'm a really, really big fan of that design lever, personally. Tuning lever, I guess. Whatever, they're all the same. Anyway, Lee Sin gets 6 health growth, which helps him just withstand being in mid to late game team fights. He also gets some more Omnivamp through Safeguard and Iron Will. This could be scary because the idea of like W-maxing and Omnivamping through a lane is maybe a problem. I don't know how much Lee Sin realistically actually chain Omnivamps in fights realistically. Regardless, W second is the thing. You will feel his buff sooner rather than later. So here is Lee Sin's health pool before and after. Not actually absurd to myself, by the way, right? Going to just over 100 scaling. Not that absurd for melee champion. He could definitely go higher, and it would be, I think, thematically reasonable, all things considered. So seems like he has kind of low base stats, which is a really good way to fix solo queue versus pro disparities in general. On average. And then here's the W Omnivamp before and after. Of course, first few levels don't really change anything, but yep, as time goes on. I mean, 4% more Omnivamp certainly can matter. Level 13, again, I often maintained that things that flatly just scale based on gaining XP tend to be good things for average players in solo queue and less important for pro play. So cool to see that happening. Will this be a buff? Yes. Will it put Lee Sin into a happy champion to pick in solo queue? Absolutely not. He's like a 45% win rate solo queue champion. This is not going to be 5% win rate. There's no shot. This is going to be like charitably 1.5%, and it's not going to be that. I could be wrong, obviously, hey, but I'm putting the number down, right? It's not even going to be 1.5%. But I'm glad to see buffs. I am. Lulu definitely has been taken over quite a bit. Seems to be the pretty much primary enchanter in pro play. I forget if we've seen Yuumi nerfs recently. It turns out that if I don't do rundowns, I have a much worse memory of the patch. Like that's just true. I don't spend 3 hours on the patch, and so I forget more of it than if I hadn't. Anyway. So give teammates less move speed, CC opponents for 0.05 to 0.25 less duration, and a 0 to 2 second longer cooldown. Worth noting that way back when, the original Lulu Champion Spotlight recommends maxing W first, because Whimsy's CC duration going up by a full second, to me, was clearly the most important thing you could do as a support. Back in, like, 2011. I think it's been true for the last 10 years. I'm pretty sure. Now, to be fair, there's been a lot of changing around what's happened with the champion, but it is worth noting that for Lulu, WMAX is indeed, though not her most popular, her most successful build as a champion. This, of course, nerfs WMAX. So CC duration down by a little bit, which is going to be kind of nice. Does not affect the haste duration, but we saw the move speed is down on that ability. And the cooldown is down also. So WMAX first is definitely been hit very, very hard. WMAX second, which is what I'm simulating here, because that's what people are going to be doing, down a decent amount as well. So overall, I think this feels pretty solid. This seems like the right, I like the approach overall. I think it's actually pretty good, right? Please try to kill WMAX first. I think it's a very, very poor place for Lulu to live with WMAX first. Just, I don't know, my brain says it's like not a good thing. Don't really want to dive into that, because I don't think it's really that important for this video. But yeah, I mean, this matters, right? This is definitely a win rate drop. Pretty decent one, I think, honestly, as well. Especially to WX first. WX first probably down like 1.5–2%. W second is probably down 0.5 to 1, 1.25 maybe, something like that. Next up is Maokai. As always, I'm thankful to the unofficial League of Legends wiki for breaking apart the per level scaling on this stuff because I didn't know it. I didn't bother loading up Maokai and using, practice tool, leveling up and figuring out everything. I don't know, looked up on a wiki. So anyway, Maokai definitely turns out to be a little bit OP, a little bit too strong of a champion. Cool rework, but yeah, definitely a bit strong. So nerfs overall and buffs to his jungle clear, which both things that are pretty good. So as far as Maokai in the top lane is concerned, across this patch, he's about 2% win rate over balanced. Maokai in the jungle is about 2% win rate under balanced. That's not too bad, but it obviously means there's some room to go. So what's going on? Again, lower healing on the passive. This is only for building like Demonic Embrace second or something that the Demonic Sapling Toss were doing a little bit too well. You can see, right, the damage 110 to 310, unchanged. Bonus health ratio, unchanged. AP ratio down slightly. AP ratio down slightly. This is not a big change. It's technically there. It love taps down Demonic Embrace. As far as I can tell, actual AP builds are not performant. You look at like first item win rates. Demonic is under Sunfire. Leandries is in the dumpster. If you look at second item win rates, Demonic is seemingly his best second item, though data is limited. And would you believe if you're doing well on Maokai, you might build AP, so it's behavioral biases. I don't mind this love tap. It is very, very small. One thing I actually wish they would do for this stuff is not cross numbers that didn't change. So I would like, in case you're watching this, actually I know some designers who watch these videos. I don't think this should be crossed out. It should cross out this, and then don't have this text at all, and then just this, right? So, basically, and then only cross out the AP ratio and then put the new AP ratio. Makes it much easier to parse the patch notes. I can also deliver this feedback internally, and I will. But, I'm here, so I'm doing it. Okay. Let's move forward to the actual deal with the numbers. So, Maokai passive healing. This is the actual numbers. This is using Maokai's base health as the example. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have Maokai's base health in here appropriately, and here's how much healing he's getting before and after. With, you know what? Yeah, with the base health going from 4.8% to 4.3%, yeah, or to 4.5%, so yeah, 0.3% down. This should be accurate. It's going to be relatively accurate regardless. The healing is down a pretty decent amount. Keep in mind that the flat baseline healing, there's some flat baseline healing, by the way, on the ability, which, interestingly, not mentioned here. Should be. Whatever. Point is, the more health you buy, the more this nerf matters. That's the point of what I'm saying here. The more health you buy, which is going to buy as a tank, the more this nerf actually matters. So in the real world, these numbers are going to be even more drastic of a nerf. Okay. Secondarily, here is Q damage to monsters before and after. Just basically 40 flat damage got added, right? Instead of plus 40, it's plus 80. Right, instead of plus 120, it's plus 160. So yeah, this is all going to be pretty solid. As far as I can tell, the percent health damage to monsters does exist. It's all there, but pretty important clear speed buff. This is very, very meaningful. This should be a quite substantial amount of clear speed. I expect this to be a pretty large buff. Keep in mind, of course, the fact that, again, he got nerfed as far as healing. He is a weaker overall champion, but a faster clear. This should definitely bring the roles a bit more in line. Big fan of the changes. I think it's very, very good stuff. Probably about, I would say under 1% down for like top lane, whatever, Maokai. But this change by itself is probably 1% up. So I would guess like 0.3% win rate up or so for jungle, and about 1% down for top lane is my guess here. Some bug fixes, cool stuff. Misfortune, definitely a huge winner, very, very strong champion, and so deciding that, cool, we're going to just lower some of her solo queue problems. In general, as I've mentioned before, scaling base stats, I think on average, tend to be low MMR skewed, because the better you are as a player, the less you're going to be in these like contentious 1v1s with Talon, because positioning and your team peeling, right, if you're a challenger or, a pro and you're getting 11 CS a minute, 0.3 attack damage growth isn't as important when you are already at 5 items, right? Like, unsurprisingly, a bronze player farms less gold than a master tier player, which means that for a level 13 Misfortune or a level 17 Misfortune, the base stats mean more for the bronze player than they will for the masters player, right? Like that should logically follow. That's the explanation of why that stuff matters. So health growth, I think, is a bit more flat, because like Talon still exists in all MMRs. Just like the ability to be assassinated is going to be a little bit lower when you're a better player. Ward control, supports peeling, positioning, no longer to be in the map, like that kind of stuff. Right, this is why we also just kind of tend to see fewer assassins in things like, right, the more coordinated you get, right, the better people get, the less you see assassins in general, right? Like Talon and Zed aren't there, right? But outside of being a jungler, but you know, in solo queue. So very minor touches there. That's not the big thing here. This is to say that I assume Misfortune is probably still a bit low MMR skewed, and doing scaling stat things is a really good way to kind of go about that and nudge the champion towards a balanced in more places direction. But again, lower than overall, definitely an OP champion. So here is Misfortune's, it's backwards. Here's her health, here's her attack damage. Don't worry about it. Yep, a bit less damage, a bit less health. Keep in mind, of course, you're going to build a lot of raw AD, so again, these aren't going to be nearly as stark in the real world, whereas the health difference is actually going to be pretty flat unless you're going shield bow, where it will be a little bit smaller if that happens. Next up is Nocturne. Nocturne getting 0.5 attack damage growth. That's actually pretty meaningful. What's interesting is, I think in pro play especially, junglers get fewer and fewer resources as you know, they let AD carries and mid laners poach their camps. So I think very quickly junglers get underleveled in pro, on average, compared to solo queue, where they're often gonna like do more like taxing lanes and whatnot and actually coming out ahead. Junglers are very impactful, by the way. Jungle is a very, very important role in all levels of play. But I think, once again, sort of scaling stats is going to tend to be a solo queue, is going to tend to affect solo queue more than it's going to affect pro play, for junglers specifically, because they're often unallocated the resources later on in the game. So 0.5 AD growth. Here is Nocturne's attack damage before and after as a result. I figure because he has a core to the kit bonus AD buff. Here is his attack damage before and after on top of his Q buff. Obviously, less important. You know, losing 0.5 AD growth, losing 6 AD means less, unsurprisingly, when you get a bunch more AD. You know, a flat plus 20 to 40 overall, or no, it's 20 to 60 overall. Still, I mean, yeah, it's a nerf. It's going to matter. Every single one of his spells is a bonus AD ratio, if I recall correctly. Q and R. W and E don't have bonus AD ratios. Cool, great. Yeah, seems solid. I guess I'll look up his winner across the patch, because he got some love as well, like the attack buffs and whatnot. Yeah, okay, Nocturne's definitely OP, 2% above baseline OP champ. Will still be very strong, by the way. 0.5 AD growth is relatively high, but he'll still be, I think, on the, you know, north of 50% in solo queue. So if you like Nocturne, still a strong champion for sure. Next up is Thresh. I'm a very big fan of these changes. So Thresh is in an unfortunate situation where WMax is still his best build, and WMax is the least interesting version of Thresh. I think ultimately they need to nerf the scaling of W some more still. WMax Thresh is the most boring Thresh. Please, 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 right? I would love if you would nerf this. That would be better for everyone. But Flay damage up substantially is good. I'm glad to have him be more of a damage champion. This is a champion who literally gains ability power and on hit damage just by being around things dying. Like, his passive is, I literally gain damage. Like, he has functionally sent his passive, right? Like, the thematic tie-in is there, and it started with Thresh. Minus the attack range stuff, obviously. But point is, yeah, Thresh getting in there, Thresh doing stuff, Thresh being a frontliner and fighting and being a cool guy and casting Flay and dealing damage. Yes, absolutely, yes, please do this. This is what I want to see out of Thresh. So thematically, very much a fan of this being the changes they're going for. Overall, Thresh is in a weak spot for solo queue, K whatever, but WMax Thresh is like a 53% win rate champion. Now, there's a bias there. This is using Lawlytics data, where like if they can identify that Thresh has maxed W and then maxed Q, or maxed W and then maxed E, that means he's gotten to like level 12. Supports don't get to level 12 on losing teams very often, so it's not really a 53% win rate build, but his best build is WMax into Emax. Pretty definitively, like, there's enough data to be like, yep, this is definitely his best build. Leave Q as 1.1 W into Emax. Technically that doesn't change. W into Emax still seems really good here. So, max W, max E lets you be like the melee lantern guy, I guess, and that's fine. But let's go talk about the numbers in detail. So here is Thresh's health before and after. Really good amount of health. Definitely enough to, be able to be a frontliner if he was able to continually get experience. Here is Flay damage before and after. I don't know why. Okay, hold on. We're gonna just do the numbers live. So the base damage is up by 10. The scaling's up by 5 as well. So it's not 35 plus 30. It's 35 plus 40. There we go. Much, much nicer. Those numbers we wanted to see. So, interestingly, the numbers are remaining at right about 15% more damage at all points in time. We can show a decimal to see kind of the ways in which it wiggles around. But I basically put an approximation for how much AP Thresh gains from souls, because he gets them no matter what. The AP ratio didn't change, so there is some increasing amount of the base damage that didn't go anywhere. And that's why it's 65-75. Well, I mean, because you have like 1 AP at level 1, but like why 185, 215 is actually 216, 236. Because I ballparked an approximation of how much AP I thought you would have. Sailing close to the game. Is it perfectly accurate? No. Does it matter? Also no. But 15% more damage on Flay seems pretty good. So I think that's a pretty nice buff. Cool to see it. This is a pretty decent buff for the champion. Again, just going to point out that W max, E max is the better build. EW is really uncommon, but seems relatively performant as well. So maybe EW is the new thing because of how much E was buffed. But yeah, I think the very least I could say, hey, if you want to play Thresh and do really well, leave Q as a 1-pointer, pick either order of the other buttons, and you're gonna do pretty well here. Actually, you're gonna do really well with Thresh using W and E. Go have fun. Okay, moving forward, Udyr, yep, in too good of a spot for sure. His primary role has been jungle of late. He's very overpowered, doing incredibly well with sort of AP Bruiser, right? Demonic Embrace second, Sunfire, Magic Boy, Arm Max, definitely too good. So, 2 sets of changes here, basically. So, well, okay, 3. 1, generic nerf. The champion is just generically overpowered, especially with R max builds, so nerfing R as well. But then also, giving support, these are all to an AD build, okay? So trying to buff AD Udyr, worth noting that R max and W max is a 54% win rate build. Interestingly, this is interesting. Okay, so data suggests that Q max E max is actually completely viable. So I don't know if there's like biases that I'm not seeing here in the data. Like Qmax Wmax is mediocre. Qmax Emax is great and only slightly worse than like RW or RE. RW and RE are like tied. So according to Lawlytics data, with more than enough data to be confident that like we're not looking at variance here, Qmax Emax might be very pog, but stay tuned. We're going to look at some stuff. Okay, so let's start with the health and armor growth changes, which is that, hey, our boy has less health. Okay, fair enough. And because he lost armor, we can multiply them together and get an overall physical durability lost of around, eventually like 9%. So much worse late game scaling. Looking at his overall win rate, Udyr generally scales up with game time, up and to the right. So could definitely deal with scaling nerfs. Cool, great, go do that. That sounds fun. Okay, wonderful. So far, I'm on board. I think, again, he needs to be nerfed, and I think they are aimed well also. Okay, what's next? Actually, I'm going to skip over to the R nerf, because, again, R max is his best build right now, and he's losing 0 to 10 damage by max rank, and the minion mod starts lower, and eventually, very, very, very late game goes higher, but of course, the base damage is still lower. So, what is the R damage? Now, I didn't include any AP here. I know his most common R max build is Sunfire into Demonic Embrace, which has AP. I decided not to include it because I just didn't want to staple ability power at very specific amounts of time and then stop. It just didn't seem really important, especially considering that the nerf is down by 1/8, aka 12%, which is not that far from these numbers in the first place. So, imagine the nerf is very slightly larger than on paper, because the AP ratio is down by 1/8, whereas the base damage is down by 1/10, right? Okay, fine. But anyway, here is the damage before and after. And then with the minion mod going on, it's down, of course, even more. And though the minion mod is up at 16, the base damage is low enough that it's still less damage to minions. No matter AP can make up for this. Like, it is always a nerf, is what I'm saying. Like, there's not, like, a value where before and after it's actually a buff somewhere. It's always less damage to minions, and it's always less damage to champions and whatnot as well. So, damage is down. Okay, great. Let's scroll back up then to the Q stuff. So, we're actually going to start with W, because the Q is the really weird, wonky stuff. Okay, so the W, so the percent max health on hit heal has gone down, okay? The shield on activation has also gone down from 2 to 4 to 2 to 3.5. So here's the shield before. Keep in mind there's a base value to the shield as well. And here's the shield after. Pretty light touch, but still actually, 8% down on the shield. And the more health you buy, Sunfire, Demonic, Dead Man's Plate, things like that, the more this is going to be nerfed, because again, the base value is keeping this up into the 90s, up towards 100%. But overall down. Also worth noting that because his base health went down and it's a max health shield, I am reflecting the health differences in the shield as well, which further pushes the nerf. Okay, so the shield is down, but they have gone from a percent max health. So instead of having a flat 15 lifesteal and the percent max health heal scaling with rank, it's instead the flat percent max health heal stays flat and the lifesteal scales with rank, which means, remember how we mentioned that Emax Wmax was far, far below, or sorry, QW was far below QE. This allows QW to potentially be a viable build for AD Udyr. Because if we were to max W second, here is how much health on hit he is getting, asterisk, on a bonus AD build. I did not do this for a full tank build who has no bonus AD at all. Those numbers aren't there. But here's how much health he's getting on hit every time with an AD build. And from level 6 onwards, aka we got rank 2 of the ability. Yep, the lifesteal takes over. And by what level? It's a roughly 13? No, I guess it would be, well, we get the last rank here, right? At 17. If I recall correctly how these abilities cap out. Then off he goes, right? Like, this is a pretty good amount of increased lifesteal, which can make W max second maybe worth doing. Maybe not. Keep in mind that this got nerfed and whatnot, so maybe you're still going to leave W to third, but it's a possibility, and it is up for AD builds and makes QW closer to QE. Now, the final change is, of course, Qmax. Now, once again, QE is only about 1.5% behind RE or RW, so it's not that bad. And it's, again, overall seems to be pretty performant, but mana cost is down pretty substantially. Great, that's easy enough, not a problem there. That's going to matter some. And then here is, if you awaken, so I'm not using anything here. It's an AP ratio on a meant to be AD build, so I'm not touching this. I don't think it's going to be a thing. Though theoretically, an AP build going QR, you can awaken Q and then just cast R normally. I guess theoretically. I don't think this is going to happen anywhere. We're gonna ignore that this tooltip exists, because I can't see a build where it's going to actually happen. But he now gains bonus attack range on Q even when it's not awakened. That is a big deal. That definitely matters. That's going to feel good. That's going to be a buff to Q Udyr. Q-Dyr. There we go. Awaken Q now gets an extra 2 to 5% based on champion level and scales up bonus AD max health damage on the first 2 attacks. So Q on its own has a max health damage on the first 2 attacks. Awakened Q, Q also gives attack speed, and Q gives on hit damage for 4 seconds. Awakened Q also has 6 bolts of lightning, 6 lightning strikes that have percent health damage on them. Awakened Q is now also getting an increased percent damage to my target for 2 strikes. So what this is I'm taking 6 seconds of DPS, I'm taking 4 seconds of DPS, aka 6 strikes. Now, is it always going to be 6 strikes in 4 seconds? No. But I'm using 6 times the on-hit damage. I'm using the first 2 awakened Qs, the first 2 non-awakened Qs, and the first 6 awakened Qs here, and saying that's the total damage of the ability. Over the course of 4 seconds and 6 auto attacks, Awakened Q will deal this much damage. Before and after. Some of it's physical, some of it's magic. I assumed a generic bonus AD ratio growth from buying AD items, not doing a tank build. And despite the fact that we're getting an entirely new mechanic here, of a bunch of bonus damage that scales up bonus AD and all that kind of stuff, it's not absurdly more damage. It is more damage, and pretty meaningfully so, but it's not, to an absurd degree, more Q damage. Now, keep in mind, though, if you only get 2 attacks off, it's way better. Because if we're not getting the full 4 seconds of on-hit damage on Q, if we're not getting the full 6 lightning strikes of empowered, awaken Q, all possibilities, right? But also if your fight goes, like, way longer and you actually get, a bunch of non-awakened Qs and you get a bunch of, just damage outright because you attacked for longer, right? Like, exactly awakened Q for 6 auto attacks does this much more damage. Unawakened Q, no increased damage. Awakened Q for more attacks, not as much damage. Awakened Q for fewer attacks, more than this. This percentage-wise. The flat damage add is going to be the same. So yeah, definitely a sizable buff, right? Definitely matters. There's a good chance that QE Udyr becomes the dominant build. R got nerfed, Q got buffed. I don't think QW overtakes QE, but yeah, I think he needed the nerfs anyway. So the health down, the armor down, that all matters. The W shield down, that matters. Although at rank 1, it's the exact same ability in exactly all respects. So QE and RE are the same build aside from R nerfs and Q buffs. We'll see. I think Udyr's going to still end up being too strong. I think Udyr is taking over as the dominant build. We'll see how it goes. I think he'll be overall weaker than before this update. But I could be wrong. And that this buff and this eventual scaling buff means more than this nerf. I'm not certain. I don't think so, but it's possible. Okay, there's some competitive changes around... This is kind of cool. So instead of like picking support or fill gives you autofill protection, instead your server will tell you, hey, by the way, there aren't enough top laners right now. If you queue top lane, we'll give you a game of autofill protection. And you go, yeah, okay, I'll play top lane. You are guaranteed to be given top lane. Right, so let's see. Which roles in high demand give you a priority tag. You can now decide if you want to queue for one of these rolled and avoid being autofilled in your next game and to get into a game more quickly. Okay, so sorry, it's not avoid being autofilled in your next game. It's you queue for this, you're going to get that. If you queue top lane, you're going to be a top laner and you're going to get a game really quickly because the game is trying to find top laners for you, right? And then so now you don't get the protection when queuing support or fill instead. But if you do ever get forcibly autofilled, you get protection for 2 games. So you can never be autofilled more than once every 3 games as a player, and the game will tell people if you're willing to queue top, your current queue type needs top laner. So come on in. I think that's cool. I think it's a really, really cool thing. Very big fan of the game telling players like, here's how to reduce friction for you. If you want, come opt in. I think that's great. So that's a really cool change. I like this a lot. I think it's really, really cool. And now you get to be suggested players who were honored by, and hey, come play with this guy who honored you or that you honored. Sounds cool. Okay, let's go TLDR. I managed to spend 42 minutes on like 7 changes. Let's talk about it. Patch 12.18 TLDR, we are approaching Worlds. Pretty light patch overall. Let's talk about it. Ashe Q is getting a 5 to 15% attack speed buff. She's already relatively balanced at AD carry. Will be even stronger now. Seems like a good patch or a new champion for the next patch. Hecarim, definitely OP, losing 25 health, losing some AD ratio on Q, and losing some Omnivamp on W. Ultimately, needs the nerfs. AD builds should still be the dominant builds. He's got some room to go on AD versus tank. Overall needs the nerfs. Seems pretty good. Kalista, a big pro play problem permaband on red side. Basically, 30 base health nerf means that maybe you can find lanes that can match her in the early game and that you're allowed to leave her up because, we can just play Lucian into it, or we can just play whatever into it and it'll be okay. Possibility. Kayn, scaling Nightmare as Darkened Kayn, losing some AD ratio on his Q at the very end. Should be pretty meaningful, should be actually quite a big deal and a solid nerf to Kayn. Lee Sin gets some health growth and a rank up incentive on W. W max second is already the build, so we'll feel this from level 8 onward. He is a really, really, really weak champion for the average player in solo queue. He will be slightly less weak, though still not in a great spot, and we'll probably see some Lee Sin at Worlds. Lulu, actually, W max first has been her best build for a while, though it's not very popular. W max second is her most popular version of this, and W's scaling is getting cut, so a very, very, very minor nerf at rank 1 of the ability, No change on the cooldown. Yeah, okay, a little bit less move speed, but whatever. But the big thing is that max ability is a quarter second less CC duration and 2 seconds increase on the cooldown. Gonna be a much bigger deal. Lulu gonna lose about 1% or so win rate. Maokai getting sets of changes. They are nerfing the healing, which, okay, he's a bit OP, so they're going to nerf that down through that. But they are buffing his Q damage by 40 to monsters, to flat 40 more damage to monsters compared to the previous patch. Pretty big deal here. Certainly, I think, going to be impactful and meaningful, and glad to see it happen. Because, yeah, Maokai top lane is 2% above 50%, and Maokai jungle is 2% below 50%. So, could deal with a sizable jungle buff and a decent top lane nerf to boot. There is a minor AP ratio nerf to the E. This isn't a very, very big deal. Of course, you could go Demonic Embrace second. You might still. Not a huge change, all things considered. Misfortune loses some AD growth and some health growth. Definitely a very overpowered champion. Good to see her nerfed. Down somewhat towards actual Earth. Pretty, I think, well-aimed nerf overall. Will still be strong. Nocturne is 0.5 AD growth. Also an incredibly strong champion after the most recent changes to him. Should still be in a good spot there as well. Next up is Thresh, who lost 5 health growth and gains a solid 10 to 10 to 30 damage on Flay, trying to coax him into maxing E first or second more often. I've looked at Thresh builds a lot over the past year or so. Basically, leave Q as a 1-point wonder and then max either W or E first and then the other one second, and you'll have your best luck playing Thresh. Leave Q at 1 point, max other abilities. This is the best way to play Thresh right now, so go do that until numbers change around even more. Go have fun. That'll be much better for you. The 5 health growth also pretty meaningful, and Thresh will be in a pretty good spot if, again, you stop maxing Q. He'll be in a good spot. Udyr, a pretty big set of changes. So health growth and armor growth are down as a generic nerf to Udyr. Our damage rank up and AP ratio down as well. Tune of about a 10% damage nerf. Also has overall less minion wave clear, so that's going to matter for our spam in terms of just crushing minion waves up in top lane. Worth noting that W's rank up incentive went from % health heal to lifesteal instead, because they are trying to buff AD Udyr. So Udyr is getting lower mana cost on Q. He is getting new bonus damage, extra, even more bonus damage on Awakened Q. This ends up being, we have a data table right here, up to about 5 to 14% more damage if you're getting many auto attacks off and you're getting the entire Awakened Q damage suite out. This is how much damage change you are getting as a result from that. But just some other nice things like getting the bonus attack range, even when not empowered and all that stuff. And again, W moving up to some more lifesteal instead of health on hit or a % max health on hit. The shield going down a little bit as less good to max. Fair enough. Pretty standard stuff right there. So I think Q max, E max Udyr is probably going to be the dominant build next patch. R max Udyr is going to be fine, I think, realistically. Honestly, not going to be that big of a deal, but it's going to be R max into E max as well. E max second is going to appear to be the dominant build, and I think Q is going to overtake R. He will still be, I think, quite strong in both contexts. We'll see if I'm right, but that's what I believe to be true. And one final thing in the TLDR is, hey, by the way, the game will now tell you, hey, we don't have any top laners. If you want to queue top lane, you'll guaranteed to not be auto-filled out of it. You'll be guaranteed to get top lane if you want to queue for it. And hey, you've got a quick queue as well because we need top laners. So I think that's a really, really cool thing. I like this. I think it's really, really smart. I love it. Cool beans. All right. Thanks for watching. Appreciate y'all very, very much. Stay wonderful. See you later. Bye-bye.